Before we begin, you need to know that this video is not for anyone with a queasy stomach. Seriously. I mean that. I could make a joke here, but there really is going to be some pretty disturbing imagery popping up pretty soon. It's some disturbing stuff, so if you're not a fan of horror, it might end up making you a bit cross. Huh? That's not gonna make any sense here. Forget that. What's shaking? My name's Cam, welcome back to another video. So look, jokes aside, there is going to be some genuinely disturbing content in this video, not just blood, gore and violence. Quite a bit of other stuff, almost every trigger warning that you can possibly imagine. So please, just keep that in mind before watching any further. I'm gonna be really testing the limits of what YouTube lets me get away with in this video, which isn't much as it is, to be honest. Today I want to talk to you about a comic book series that, in my experience, has been one of the most disturbing reads of my entire life. It's a series that ran from 2010 to 2017 called Crossed. You get the joke now? The one that the one I told at the start of the video. Crossed is a horror comic book series that ran for nearly 10 years, spanning a very long list of different writers and illustrators, and in fact a lot of different story threads entirely. The horror in question being extreme gore and violence. It's rare that I will feel legitimately uneasy reading a book, or especially a comic book. The closest I've probably ever come is the work of Junji Ito, albeit for different reasons. And I know, Junji's work isn't comic books, they're manga. I know that, okay? Okay. The world has been overrun by a vicious, infectious disease that completely destroys the host's inhibitions. Not just that, but also their morals and all sense of empathy and restraint. What's left is a human that is driven forward by quite literally only their most carnal desires or impulses, but amplified to an insane degree. Killing and sex is all that matters in this new world, and the disease leaves its mark in the shape of a bloody and scabbed cross on the face. Imagine The Walking Dead if the zombies could run, talk, use weapons, and wanted to do a whole lot more than just eat you. Now, it would be easy to look at the Crossed comics on the surface and think that it's nothing but shock value body horror. Not that that's always a bad thing anyway, but allow me to convince you that there are actually some deeper and more troubling themes in these blood-splattered pages. Crossed deals with the extremities of violence and impulse, sure, but it also explores some very authentic instances of dread, loneliness, desperation, grief, and very rarely, hope. First though, I want to take a couple of moments to talk about the artwork, in particular the covers. While they are gratuitously bloody to accurately represent the story inside, the sheer artistic talent and creativity also becomes quite hypnotizing. Most of the time that I used reading these stories was spent slowly looking over every little grotesque detail in the pages or on the covers. They're just so unusual and imaginative, and yeah, I'll admit it, beautifully gruesome. There's a piece of you that feels uncomfortable or on edge looking at these illustrations, but somehow that makes it just more exciting. In fact, the covers for the Crossed comics remind me a lot of the golden age of horror books and comics. The days where in place of a more simple design, we had chilling and often hand-illustrated creations that told you exactly what you could expect from the story inside. Something interesting is that Crossed rarely chooses to put its heroes on the cover, instead opting for mostly unimportant, or in some cases even completely irrelevant, characters or infected characters, or just straight up scenes of doom. A child swings gleefully on the playground next to the skinned corpses that were likely their parents. A man lies crying with his foot in a bear trap as the Crossed get closer. He puts the barrel of his gun under his chin to avoid a fate worse than death. The Statue of Liberty has mangled bodies tied across her face, mirroring the disease that destroyed the very freedom she represented. There are countless covers in the Crossed series, each as artistically insane and unique as the next. And that's not even mentioning the thousands of pages that have much the same. I just think that the ability to make such truly dark subject matter entertaining to look at without losing its mood is an incredible feat. So, as for the stories themselves, as I mentioned, there are quite a few different story threads that follow completely different characters and timelines. There's a lot, so I just simply can't talk about all of them. However, I do want to mention just a couple that stood out to me. The original run, simply titled Crossed is perhaps the best. It shows the beginning of the outbreak and eases you into the severity of the character's situation, albeit at a very steep incline. It's in this story thread that for the first time we see the very crumbling of civilization very quickly. The story does end up jumping forward quite a fair bit to a more prepared group of survivors who are not only trying to avoid roaming packs of the Crossed, but also dealing with dwindling resources and the truly devastating mental damage that a whole catastrophe like this would have caused. The original run is what establishes very early on that this is not The Walking Dead. No character is safe. Children are not safe. If you confront these enemies, you will lose, and death will be the best of it. One of the most shocking bits I remember from Crossed entirely is in the first original run. There's a bit where a character, Joel, traveling with his wife and his daughter, discovers and explains to the rest of the group that salt is the answer to killing these enemies. We, as the reader, believe it because we've seen it before. In a fictional world, it just makes sense. The bad guys, the monsters, they always have a weakness. They always do. Then later on in that issue, Joel and his wife and his daughter are cornered. He tells his family not to worry, that they're going to be okay, and then he makes a ring of salt around him. The Crossed come forward, they look at the salt, and then they simply step over it. What happens after that, I really don't think I can show in the video. But basically Joel and his wife are violated while they watch their little girl get hacked to pieces. When I was reading this comic and I saw this panel, I literally put my head in my hands and said out loud, "Holy shit, I'd never seen anything like it before in my life." Another really good volume from the Crossed series is called Family Values, written by David Lapham. It is equally, if not more, disturbing than the last one I mentioned, but I feel this story has a lot more emotional value for many different reasons. Addie is a young woman who lives on refuge with her family and a bunch of other survivors. Under the stern and patriarchal leadership of her father, they've found a pocket of safety in this absolutely chaotic world. They grow crops, they socialize, and they keep a tight defensive perimeter of experienced farmers and hunters. This is as nice a start as any Crossed comic will have until it's revealed that Addie's father has been sexually abusing her sisters for a long time, since before the outbreak even happened. Addie fears the Crossed, but her father is a different monster entirely, and somehow feels even more dangerous. Of course, everything goes from bad to worse, and there's not much more I can really say about Family Values without going into major spoiler territory, but Addie's desperate attempts to keep her family safe and the things that she has to witness and experience reach levels of sheer desperation that I don't think I've ever seen even Rick Grimes sink to. There's many different stories or runs throughout this series as a whole, involving countless talented and perhaps slightly deranged illustrators and writers, the longest running stretch being Badlands with a total of like 100 issues. Crossed is a truly great, sickening, exciting, and grotesquely terrifying comic book series. It's without a doubt the most disturbing thing I've ever read, and while it is definitely not for everyone, I think if you can handle gore and pretty much every other disturbing thing under the sun, if you can handle that, and if you've always wondered what The Walking Dead would be like without the safety bars or plot armor, this series might be well worth your time. At the very least, I can say you were warned. Anyway, that's it. Thanks for watching. Especially if you watched this far in the video. I really do appreciate you. Thank you. See you in the next one. Catch ya.